Allocation Report webinar. I am Susan McDonough. I'm on the Connect Carolina Project Change Management team, and I'll be walking us through the webinar this morning. And also joining me from another room are Nicole Shevik. Nicole is a business analyst for commitment control for the Connect Carolina Project team, and she's been working really hard for the last couple months to get this report ready for you all. We also have Price. A lot of you know Henry. Henry is a budget officer in the budget office, which is now officially called the Office of Planning, Budget, and Analysis. But for today, I'm going to refer to it as the Budget Office for short.
Susan?
Yes.
Just one moment. It looks like people are saying that they cannot hear.
Okay, they can't hear me.
Okay, actually now people are saying that they can. So it looks like if you're having a sound problem, then you just might want to check your own personal filters. But sorry to interrupt. I think you can continue on.
That's okay. Was it a lot of people that couldn't hear, or?
Looks like 2 said.
Okay. All right. All right, so I'll just carry on then. So I was just about to introduce you, Rebecca. So the third person we have joining is Rebecca Jones. She's also part of the change management team, and she's going to be helping facilitate the Q&A session, as well as the session in general, like things if you can't hear, and monitoring the chat window. So thank you all for joining us and helping out with today's webinar. All right, so a few housekeeping things. We are scheduled to go for an hour. We will probably use all of that time between my presentation and the Q&A session. If you've joined these webinars before, that you know the way we handle questions, because this is one-way audio because of the large number of people that we have joining and the limited amount of time, you can hear us. Hopefully, but we can't hear your audio back. But we really, really encourage your questions. We want everybody to understand the content of this webinar. So for questions, please type your question in the chat window. We will answer them in the order they came in during the presentation piece. If for some reason we run out of time and we can't get to all of your questions, we will respond back out via email in written form. But we will address all of your questions one way or the other, so please ask them. Some reference material that will be available to you regarding this content of the webinar is a recording of the webinar. We are recording this webinar. We will post it to CC Info just as soon as we can download it, get it formatted and that kind of thing. So hopefully by the end of the day on the recording. There's a document we put together called Understanding Your Formula Allocation Amount. I encourage you to take the time to read that. It will cover everything that I'm going to cover today, but you'll have it there in sort of written prose format. And then the procedure for running the FNA Formula Allocation Report, the step-by-step of what I'm going to cover today is there in document form for you. And also a document called Using Web Report Studio. So the Formula Allocation Report is running off this tool called Web Report Studio. So it's a newer tool available to us in addition to the InfoPorte Department Accounting area of InfoPorte, the SASBA reports. Web Report Studio is just another reporting tool, so it's just a different way of entering filters and that kind of thing. So there's this Using Web Report Studio document that sort of is an overview of how to use that reporting tool. But I'm going to walk us through the basic things that you need to know to be able to run the report today as well, using Web Report Studio. All right. So topics for today, what are we going to cover? First, I'm going to go over the 4 parts of FNA Budget. So the FNA budget that you receive each year is comprised of 4 parts, and so I'm going to just review what those 4 parts are. Next, how FNA formula allocation is calculated. Run through the calculation, which will be a main focus of today. Then we're going to look at the report. How do you run it? How do you make sure you run it accurately to get the information that you want? And then I'll finish up with how do you find your FNA budget journal. So all of the FNA budget you get is gotten by a budget journal that the budget office enters, and they take on different formats or different naming conventions. So I want to go over how you look those up and how you recognize your different budget journals. All right, so that is what we're going to cover today. So let's start with the 4 parts of FNA budget. And let me just say, to preface this section and your FNA budget in general, is that the amount of FNA budget that you receive each year is not different in Connect Carolina from what you were receiving in FRS in our legacy system. In other words, what you would have received if we were still in FRS is the same as you're receiving in Connect Carolina. That's not changed. It's just that, now we're in a new system. It has a little bit of a different structure. So how you get that money in some aspects comes in different chunks and different amounts in those chunks. And so that's what we would just want to make sure everyone understands, when you get those chunks, like what does that represent. But the total amount ultimately is the same as you would have received in FRS. All right? So with that, the 4 parts of your FNA budget are first, permanent budget, and that's just a fixed amount that is distributed to your department each year. It rarely changes. Sometimes there is a change, but for all intents and purposes, most of the time, year over year, it's the same. Then you have your formula allocation amount, and that's the amount that your department gets based on what you've earned, the project activity, what the project activity in your department earns each year. You get an amount based on that. And then you have carry forward, which, as the name suggests, is the amount that you did not use from your FNA budget from the prior year that you carry over into the new year. And then last would be other allocations that the budget office enters throughout the year. So those are the 4 components of the overall FNA budget that you get throughout a fiscal year. All right, so let me just take one slide to talk about one way that the amount of FNA budget that you're getting each year might feel a little bit different, because the way you get your permanent budget and formula allocation components comes in different chunks, if you will. So let's just look at that a minute. So prior to Connect Carolina, how the budget office gave you your permanent budget and formula allocation was like this. They would enter an initial budget journal, which that journal comprised both your permanent budget and your formula allocation, so it's a big amount, okay? And then after that, they would go through the process of calculating what your department actually earned in earned FNA, and then to the extent that an adjustment was needed, they would enter a second journal to adjust that formula allocation component based on what your department actually earned. So it was like this lump amount, then an adjustment, okay? Now with Connect Carolina, they enter that formula allocation journal once. They do the calculation up front of what you actually earned and enter it one time. So you're getting your permanent budget journal just as permanent budget now, and then you're getting your formula allocation budget journal just as formula allocation. So you can see how the amounts will feel different. So just looking at an example here, let's say prior to Connect Carolina, you would have gotten this, journal, let's just say, $100,000 for FNA Budget. But really what that journal was comprised of was $25,000, just for example purposes, of permanent budget. That's what you got each year, year over year. And $75,000 was for formula allocation, what you got year over year prior to the adjustment. Well, then the budget office would go and calculate what you actually earned for, earned F&A, and let's say it was you were really owed $2,500 more. So then they would enter another budget journal of $2,500, and the total overall amount you got between permanent budget and formula allocation was $102,500. Okay. Now with Connect Carolina, you get this permanent budget of $25,000. It's just permanent budget. And then the budget office calculates how much formula allocation you really are owed up front, and they enter a budget journal for that. And you can see then that would be the combination of the 75 plus the 2,500 gives you 77.5. But the overall amount that you ultimately get between permanent budget and formula allocation is the same from prior to Connect Carolina to now that we're in Connect Carolina. All right? So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. All right, so now let's look at how formula allocation is calculated, like the components that go into it, and then we'll look at how we run the formula allocation report. All right, so basically there's three factors, if you will, that go into how much formula allocation you're getting. And first component is that it's based on an earned F&A from the prior fiscal year. So you spent money from a project in 2016, you're going to get that budget amount in 2017. Okay, and you'll see when we run the report, we're going to use fiscal year 2016 because that's the basis from which we're getting our 2017 budget. All right. So how we get at that base amount, if you will, that earned F&A, is based on transactions that have a combination of your project ID and one of these accounts that's listed here, 559, and then there's 3 different accounts. So the total of transactions with those combinations form this basis from which we then make the further calculation. All right, and the other 2 factors are, one, the school that you are in, and I'll explain both of these in just a minute, the school that you are in, and then what's called the resource type. And the resource type is basically how much your base amount, that earned F&A, is going to get taxed. All right, so let's look at each of those 2 factors, the school and the resource type. All right, the school. So we have 4 schools on campus that split your formula allocation amount between the department and the dean's office. So if you're in the college, the School of Dentistry, Medicine, or Public Health, then 15.6% of that earned amount that I just explained was, the earned amount based on your project ID in one of those accounts. You take that amount and you get 15.6% of that goes to your department. And then there's an additional percent that would go to your dean's office, okay? And that percent is the difference between those 4 schools. If you're in any other school, you're in the School of Government, you're in the School of Education, you're in the School of Social Work, whatever it is, then you take that base amount and you get 19.5% of that goes to the department. But then there is no additional amount that goes to the dean's office. It just all goes to the department. Okay? So that's how the school component plays into what you get of that base earned F&A amount. Okay, now the resource type. Okay, the resource type is driving how that amount is taxed, because based on the type of project it is, it's going to get, that base amount is going to get taxed to some degree, okay? So there are three factors. One, the type of research, and it basically falls into, is it clinical trial, or is it a grant that uses animals in your research, or is it some combination of both of those? The second factor is the type of funding. Is it federal or non-federal? And the third factor is where the project is located. How close are you to campus? Are you remote, et cetera? So you combine all the combinations of those factors and you get this list of what's called the resource type, okay? Now, let's look at the resource type. So here is a whole chart and a list of all the different resource types. And why we're showing this to you today is that the report, the F&A Formula Allocation Report, has a column for the resource type. So when you see this, acronyms, you'll know what that means. Now, what we do, these resource types are then further grouped into chunks that drive how they're taxed. So let's look at that. So this first section here, you see anima means animal, and skipping around. These first three, anima, short for animal, ANIHM, animal and human, ACTFC, animal, CT means clinical trial, and then it's federally funded and it's on campus. And those three resource types are in this tax category called animal, and then those are taxed at 6%. So that would further, that 6% would be a tax on your earned F&A amount, okay? Next category, we've got, they're all clinical trials. You see that CT, they're either federally funded or not, and then there's some, where on campus or adjacent to campus. Those are in this tax category called Clinical Trial 1, or CT1, and those are taxed at 8%, okay? And then the next category is also clinical trials, but you can see that they are remote, and that would be in the category of clinical trial 2, taxed at 6%. All right? Then you have another category that's a combination of animal and clinical trial, federally funded or not, and somewhere on campus and some, or close to campus, and those would be animal plus clinical trial, and that's short for the abbreviation is AC1, and there you have the 6% tax plus the 8%. Then you've got another similar, but it's remote, 6% plus 6%, and then you've got two categories that are not taxed at all. So on your report, it's very likely that you'll have at least some rows where the resource type field is blank, and that's not a mistake. That just means that your F&A amount was not taxed, okay? So lucky you. All right, so that's where the tax comes in. It's driven by the resource type, and again, that's listed for you on the report. All right, so let's put this all together and look at the formula, and when you see the report, you'll see that this is how, how the formula works. You'll have a row for each of these calculations. So you take the F&A amount that the project earned, remember the project ID, any transaction that had that project ID, and then one of those accounts for the whole fiscal year, that forms that base amount, times that percent based on your school, so it's either 15.6% if you're in one of those 4 schools, or 19.5% if you're not in one of those 4 schools, and then if your dean's office gets an additional percent, we take that percent. Then 1 minus the tax rate, all those tax rates I just went through, then we would just multiply by 1 minus that rate, and to get then the total amount that should go to your department based on just that project's activity. And then you do that times as many projects that you have in your project department, and voila, you get the amount that comprise that formula allocation budget journal that you got for based on 2016. And by the way, notice my note here, and I'm going to say this several times throughout the webinar, the calculation for formula allocation is based on the project department, not the PI home job department, which both of those are filters on the report, but just know that the calculation is based on your project department. All right? So an example, let's say a project had $10,000 and that earned F&A amount is in, let's say, the School of Dentistry, so the department and in the School of Dentistry is getting, we multiply times 0.156. They're in those projects are in a tax category of 8%, so we multiply times 0.92, and so that department gets $1,435.20 based on the activity of that project, okay? So again, multiply times or add a row for each project in your department, and you're ultimately going to get at the total amount of formula allocation budget for your year. All right. So let's look at another example. This is hypothetical, making it numbers, but for illustration purposes. So let's say the oral surgery department in the School of Dentistry earned F&A of $20,000 for last year, based on last year. And they had projects in two categories that I just went through. They had animal, one set that was in the animal tax category, and another that was in the CT1 category, clinical trial 1. So what that would look like is for the animal projects, we would take, the amount to the department, $10,000 is what they earned in earned F&A. We multiply that times 0.156. We then go multiply that further times 0.94 because animal is taxed at 6%. And for the oral surgeries department's projects for the animal project category, they get $1,466.40. And then an additional amount would go to the dean's office. Okay, so based on their projects that were in that animal category. And then the projects that were in the clinical trial category, same calculation. Let's say those, and I'll be nice round numbers for my illustration, but hopefully to make the point, in their clinical trial projects, they also earned $10,000, what they spent on those projects in that account, times, again, 0.156, because that's what the department gets. And then the clinical trial category is taxed at 8%, so we multiply times 0.92, and then we get $1,435.20, okay? So that's basically the rhyme and reason to how we get the total amount of formula allocation. It's based on the type of projects that are in your department, and then how that department is taxed and how that type of project is taxed. Okay? And again, the dean's office would get an additional amount. All right? All right, well now let's look at how we run this report, the F&A Formula Allocation Report. So I got one slide here. I just want to make a note about the Web Report Studio reporting tool. Then I'll launch into the report. So it's a different reporting tool, so the filters look and behave just a little bit differently. So I wanted to just say a word about that. So here I have, this is an illustration of what a typical filter in Web Report Studio looks like. And essentially, your objective to enter your filters is to get whatever value you want from this available column over to the selected column. That's ultimately what you're trying to do. And you have three options for doing that. You can use this this magnifying glass to search for value. You can use these scroll arrows to scroll up and down the list, and then that double arrow there with the line under it would basically bring you to the end of the list. Likewise, they're grayed out here because with the beginning, but you can scroll up and down with those arrows. And then the free form field down here is for, as the name suggests, you can type in some value, click the arrow, and then ultimately you want whatever you're looking for to get over to the selected side. All right, so I'm going to run through an example here in a second, but that's basically what you need to do to complete the filters on a Web Report Studio report. And again, I encourage you to download a copy of that Using Web Report Studio document we put together that will just further explain again how to complete those filters. All right, so let's look at the report. A couple comments. It's important to, like any report that we have, it's important to carefully enter your filters so you're getting the information that you want. The security is wide open on this report, so anybody can see anybody else's project. So if you inadvertently enter wrong project number, you can see your results. You might have a palpitation or something until you realize that you entered the wrong number. So just keep that in mind as you enter your filters on this report. All right, we've got 6 filters on this report. We've got fiscal year, we've got project department, which again, the formula allocation amount is based on the project department, not the PI home job department. We've got project, PI home department, principal investigator, or DLAM. So you can run this report using one or a combination of any of those filters. All right? So let's run this report. I'm going to use the example of Department 318300. So first, we navigate to the report. We go into InfoPorte. You go into the Finance section. You click Financial Reporting, and then you click this Cash Balance tab. And then once you're in the Cash Balance tab, you'll see a link to the FNA Formula Allocation Report. Now, I had a couple emails yesterday, so just wanted to mention back out. If you do not see the Cash Balance tab, or if you see the Cash Balance tab and then you don't have the report, but yet you already have access to the Department Accounting tab in InfoPorte, you are supposed to be able to see and have access to the Cash Balance tab. In other words, if you've got the Department Accounting tab, you don't need additional approval to have reports under the Cash Balance tab. But if you have the Department Accounting tab and you don't see the Cash Balance tab or the reports under it, it's because the InfoPorte team needs to do an extra step to give you visibility to that. And so what you need to do is have your InfoPorte admin submit a remedy ticket to the InfoPorte team so that they can flip that switch for you. And please do have your InfoPorte admin make that request and that ticket. Don't put the ticket in yourself, okay? So hopefully that will be helpful to somebody. All right, so we click Cash Balance tab. You select the report. Then the first thing I want to say, when the report opens, get in the habit of clicking this link. It's up to the top right, reset to default. And what that'll do is just make sure you clear out any filters from a previous run. And then some of the other reports that we have, not this one, but some of the other reports in Web Report Studio, such as the OSR payments report that we went live with a month or a couple months ago, that has different views. And so the reset to default link also will reset the view for you. So it'll reset values and it'll reset views, okay? And it'll also save you from perhaps looking at wrong information based on wrong filters. All right, first filter, I'm just going to run through the filters here a second, and we'll run the report. So the first filter is the fiscal year. Right now, the only option is 2016. Last year, Nicole provided this information via spreadsheet manually to the MOUs. So this is the first year that we have this report available in sort of report form. So we've got 2016. Again, the reason you're running it for 2016 is the budget amount you're receiving for formula allocation for 2017 is based on what your project activity, what your project earned in 2016. Okay, so when we get into fiscal year 2018, you're going to search on 2017 and so on. Okay. All right, so next filter is the project department, which again is what the formula allocation formula is based on. And I'm going to use the search feature to complete this filter because this one requires a couple more steps, and I just thought that would be good so we can see that. But again, you can use the search feature, you can use the arrows, or you can use the free-form field. But your overall objective is to get your value over here, however you want to do that, okay? So I'm going to click this search magnifying glass. This pop-up window appears, and I, select my operand. I can select starts with, contains, ends with, the typical operands you see in a field like that. I'm going to enter in my value. Let's say I want to see all departments that start with 318, and then I click that search button, and then my values show up over here. But remember, my objective is to get them over here, the one that I want. So let's say I want department 318-300. I select it. All right. So this is what you do. Let me just make sure everyone's with me. These are the steps that you need to take to get your value using the search feature over to the selected column. First, you need to select the value, click this arrow, and then click, then the value appears. Okay, but it's just appearing at this point in your search window. You still have to select this, or the pop-up window rather, then you select it, and then it's back in your search filter. So you're selecting it in the pop-up window to make it select in the report filter itself. Okay. Once you run through this a couple times, you'll see what I'm talking about. But again, just make sure that your value is in the selected column. All right. So I've selected my department. In this example, we're going to run it by project department and get all that data. But make sure you scroll down. Most of these reports in Web Report Studio, we have multiple filters, and typically that initial screen that you're on will only show one or two filters. So you're typically going to have to scroll down to see your other filters, okay? So the next filter, you could search by project. You could search by principal investigator home job department. You could search by PI, or you could search by DLAM. So DLAM is not included in the FNA amount your department receives. The default on the report is no. So if you don't do anything with the DLAM filter, then the amount that you get on your report results is going to be the amount that your department actually received. But you don't, the DLAM amount does not go to your department. Okay, so keep that in mind if you filter by yes. All right, but you do have the ability to filter on and off for DLAM. Then you select your filters, you click View Report, and then you get your report results. Let's go through these. So I've got the results on 3 different slides because we've got a lot of columns, but obviously when you're looking at the report, you'll be looking at it in all one view. Each line on the report, like all of the reports we have, there's one row each for each unique chart field string. Okay, so you may see, if you see rows with the same project ID, it's because there's another chart field in the string that's different. So you see in my example here, we've got the same project with 3 different sources. So we're going to have 3 different rows. So just keep that in mind. That's not a mistake if you see multiple rows with the same project. And also just to point out here, it's the project ID and the account that's driving your earned F&A amount, from which then we calculate the, apply the percent. Okay. So that's the first set of columns in your report results. You're going to see the chart field string. Then you're going to see your amounts, which is going to be where you're focusing on. So the first amount is your total indirect cost. That's the total indirect cost for each unique chart field string. So that formula we just went through, okay, line by line, you have a row each where that formula is applied. Your project department, again, that's the basis, that's where the formula is pulling from. The resource type, so notice these are blank. That means they fall into one of those categories that doesn't have a tax. Lucky them. But if your project was animal, it would say anima. We have that whole list of resource types, okay? And that, you'll have that list is in the documentation that I mentioned earlier, and of course you're going to have this PowerPoint slide, so you'll be able to see all those resource types. The department rate, this is that rate that depending on what school you're in, your department is going to be, that rate is going to be applied to that base amount. Now, this column here is going to show the factor, the product of that department rate and the tax. So in this case, we had no tax, and so it's just 15.6%. That's what the department rate is. But let's say it's an animal project, which was taxed at 6%, right? So that department rate would be the product of 15.6% times the 6%, which comes out to like 14, something percent. So if you've got a resource type tax, you're going to see that department rate is going to be the rate that's a combination, the product of your school rate and the project rate, okay? And then the department allocation is how much money went to your department. Again, back to that formula that we walked through. Here it is coming to life. That's how much each project, the money that your department gets based on each project, okay? And then you've got the same thing for the dean's office, okay? So if you're in a school where the dean's office gets an additional rate, it's the same thing. There's the rate, and then there's the amount, okay? So that, and then if you do that, for your whole department, project department, the sum of those rows equals what your department got for formula allocation, okay? Kind of cool. All right, and then the last set of rows, you have your PI information, PI home job department and description, and then that DLAM indicator. So again, if you do run it, switch that DLAM filter to yes. Just keep in mind that that amount did not go to your department. That went to DLAM. But it went to DLAM based on earned F&A from your department. All right, a couple slides about Web Report Studio. So say you downloaded all your information and you've got it there on your screen, the report's running. Just a couple of features about Web Report Studio. If you right-click in any cell in Web Report Studio, this little window is going to show up with all these different features of things that you can do. Again, that Using Web Report Studio document explains each and every option there. But pretty much the most common ones are sort priority if you want to sort the data for any column, or export table. If you want to export the whole thing to Excel, you can do it from there. Okay? Also, if you want to refresh the data, so you ran it for your department, maybe now you want to run it for your PI or whatever, you can just come up here and do data refresh. We get that question a lot because you get you're just starting to use Web Report Studio, you run a report, and you get your results, and it's like, okay, and now how do I start over? But how you start over is you just come up here and go data refresh data, okay? And then remember to click that reset to default link. All right, and then also over here under the File menu, you have your usual suspects of open, close, export, etc. Those are the main ones that you're going to use, and you can also print. You're not going to use Manage Files or Open Recent, okay? All right, one note I need to make y'all aware of about this report is that there are a few fields on this report, F&A Formula Allocation Report, that could possibly change with different instances of you running the report. In other words, you run it today, you run it 2 weeks from now, you might see a few fields that are different, but not to be alarmed. Let me explain. The reason that these few fields might change from one instance to another is that the tables that for those fields are not what we call effective dated, meaning that anytime there's a change in one of those fields, it's always going to show the change. You can't make it show based on a date by which you run the report. And if the word table is like sort of foreign to you, tables is just basically, Connect Carolina is comprised of hundreds of thousands of tables. There's a table for everything, and that's where we pull from and to do all our reporting and everything else. And so most of the tables are what's called effective dated, meaning anytime you change it, then it has a history of those changes, and then some tables are not. But the thing to keep in mind is the amount is not going to ever change. So, you know, you ran it for your department, you saw how much money your department's getting. I mean, the important fields that tell you how much money a particular department got is not ever going to change. But the fields that might change, and it's all mostly around if you change your PI. So if you change your PI, then the PI PID and name on your report is going to change. The PI home, job, department, and description would change because then it would go to the new PI's, right, department. And then if for some reason, which would be very rare, you change the name of your project department, or if that department, not the name, but if the project department changes, then obviously it's going to change on the report. So it's really just anytime you have a change in your PI or the project department, then that's going to, the new, what you change it to is going to show up on this report, okay? But the amount, again, is not going to change. All right. Last in the home stretch, and then we'll turn it over for questions. I wanted to just explain how you can recognize your budget journals. So remember I said there's 4 components to your FNA budget: permanent budget, formula allocation, carry forward, and then individual journals that the budget office enters throughout the year. So your permanent budget journals are going to start always with RBS. And then we've got always 9 characters. Formula allocation starts with form plus the year in which you are getting that budget. So the budget that you're getting for this year, fiscal year 17, is going to be Form 17. Carry forward is FACF, and we've got 9 characters. And then ones that the budget office enters throughout the year looks more like a typical, transaction with the leading zeros. All right. So if you wanted to see your budget journals in InfoPorte, here's how you would enter those filters. You would search by FNA Bud first of all under the Transactions tab, and then FNA Bud, Fiscal year 2017 budget period show all, and then July of the accounting period 1, which is July. Enter in your department, which you remember is your project department, and then you will see your budget journals, and here's what they would look like. So here's the Form 17 budget journal. This is your permanent budget. This is an example of your carry forward, a couple examples of your carry forward. Okay, so just train your eye to look at the initial characters of your budget journal, and you'll know which component of your FNA budget that is. As far as the formula allocation budget journals go, so how the budget office enters those journals, they will enter a separate journal for each combination of your department and tax category. So in other words, let's say back to my School of Dentistry example. Let's say you're in the School of Dentistry, you have animal projects and clinical trial 1 projects, and you don't have any in any of the others. Then the budget office is going to enter a journal one journal for your animal project, School of Dentistry, one journal for your CT1 project, School of Dentistry. So you would see 2 budget journals, for your department. And so there's, believe it or not, 37 combinations of that between the departments and the dean's office and all the different resource types that we have. All right. So you will most of you will see multiple form budget journals when you do your search on the Transactions tab. All right? Okay, let's review. We have talked about a lot of stuff. Hopefully y'all are still with me. We have 4 components: FNA Budget, permanent, formula allocation, carry forward, and then ongoing individual ones that the budget office enters. Budget journals for FNA have a unique prefix depending on the type of journal. I just went over that. Formula allocation. Formula allocation budget journals are entered separately from permanent budget. That's what I was explaining at the very beginning. So you no longer get this initial journal that combines your permanent budget and formula allocation. You get one journal for permanent budget and then however many formula allocation journals depending on what I just explained about your department, your school, and your project activity. Factors that go into the... Yes?
Sorry, Susan. Your screen is not sharing.
Okay. All right. I assume everybody can still hear me, so since I'm almost done, let me just finish by audio, and we can go into Q&A.
Okay.
And then I'll try to figure that out. So my last 2 points, guys, that was kind of timely, just to summarize, is that just remember the allocation is based on your project department, and then remember the thing about the DLAM, that the default is no, but if you want to see how much went to DLAM based on your department activity, then you can filter for yes. And with that, and now with my screen not showing, we will open it up for Q&A. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca, and she can tell us what questions we got.
Thanks, Susan. The first question we have came in from Raj, and her question is, should the percent calc be based on MTDC rather than the base of F&A earned as 19.5%, supposed to be based off the direct cost? All right. And answering will be Henry Price.
So for those that don't know, MTDC is modified total direct cost, just to clear that air. But formula allocation is and has always been based on the indirect cost earned off your grants. That hasn't changed, and we don't see that changing in the future. Thank you.
Okay. We have another question here from Greg. He says, when I run the report for my department, I'm getting results for other departments in the project department use an allocation field, and why is that?
So let's talk about the three different departments that you see in the report. The first department that you'll see is in column E, and the title is Department, and that's the department that is used on the chart field stream. So when the transaction was entered into Connect Carolina, the department that you see in column E is the department used on the transaction. Then there is the project department, which is in, which is in column J. And that is the department that is assigned to the project. And so there's a table that the grant portion of Connect Carolina has, and that table says which department in essence owns a project. And so the project department is in column J, and that's the department that actually received the dollars, okay? And then you have the last department that we use is in column S, and that's the PI Home Job Department. None of these three departments necessarily have to be the same. If someone entered the wrong department on a transaction in error, you would see that in column E. If you're looking for your, looking at like the PI filter, notice that on the report there are two different department filters. There's one for the project department and there's one for the PI department. So if you look in the PI department by a particular project, or by a particular department number, you very likely will see other department values in the project department. If you look in project department, you very likely will see other values than your department in the PI department. So those are not necessarily going to be the same. And in many cases, they are different. So, you know, if you're, for example, a PI in the Department of Genetics, but your project belongs to the Cancer Center, those values are different. So that's why you're going to see different data in the filters. They are not necessarily going to be the same, nor should they be. It represents the data as it exists in Connect Carolina.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. We have another question. This is from Amy. I think it might be kind of the same. She said, I have filtered only for my department number, and there are projects showing that are not ours. How do we get this corrected?
And again, it's not incorrect. You have to think about the filters that you're using. And again, with that understanding that just because a project belongs to your department doesn't mean that the PI who is on that department is in your department, and vice versa. Okay, so yeah, it's basically the same question.
Okay, Amy asks, my totals on this SAS report do not tie in with the report that I received from the budget office, so what would be the best way to reconcile those differences?
What report did you receive from the budget office? Because Amy, maybe if Amy could reply to that, because we're not aware of a report that the budget office administered. And you can reply to that, Amy, and we can go on to the next question.
Okay, we have a question from LJ. What does DLAM mean, and are there perm budgeted loaded for all schools?
So DLAM stands for the Division of Laboratory Animal Medicine, and is their perm budget loaded for all schools. So if a school has a project with indirect earned, then yes, there was budget loaded.
Okay.
And I'd like to piggyback on that, the permanent budget piece. If a school has had permanent budget, you know, grandfathered in historically, that will be copied over every year end. But not all areas or departments have permanent budget in F&A.
And I was going to say, you know what, I didn't answer the right question because I was thinking formula allocation, not perm budget. So that's why Henry's here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have another question from Jay. How can we filter on allocation department?
So allocation department is project department. The project department, which again is the department to which the project belongs, is the department that received the allocation dollars. In other words, the budget dollars. So if you're looking for the allocation department, that is the project department. It's a good question.
We have another question from Greg. Is there an admin department filter?
No.
Okay. We have a question from Amy. I received an FNA allocation detail from Kimberly Johnson in the budget office to show my FNA before the stats report was released. Oh, I think that's her response.
Okay, thanks, Amy. I would suggest that you follow up with Kimberly.
I second that.
Yes, Henry seconds.
Okay, we have a question from Jay. Why is the DLAM default no? Is it automatically taken off the top?
Yeah, so DLAM, where's the question?
DLAM default no, is it?
Okay, so the DLAM default is no because so most people want to see the report that represents the dollars that their department received in budget. And so with DLAM defaulting to no, that's the amount that you get. So it's the dollars that were actually allocated to the department. Whereas where DLAM is yes, those are the dollars that went to DLAM. You don't get those dollars. Your project generated those dollars, but it's the animal tax that went directly to DLAM. So if you want to see the whole picture of what a project generated, you could do the all values in the DLAM filter, and it would show you the dollars that the project brought to your department as well as the dollars that the project brought to DLAM. But the filter is no because by and large that's specifically what people are looking for. That's a really good question. Thank you.
We have another question from Amy. She says, so again, the FNA given to us for a specific project does not belong to us, so there must be an error with the project department used. How do we report this and get it corrected to the correct project department?
Okay, so that's a very different question. So what that means, so you have to remember that a report represents the data as it is in the system. Now, if that data is incorrect, which it looks like Amy believes that it is, then what you would need to do is enter a help ticket. I would actually work with OSR on that and let them know that you have a project that you believe is in the wrong department. And then OSR can work to make sure that the information gets updated correctly in Connect Carolina. At that point, you could also work with if it's determined that it is indeed in the wrong department and maybe the allocation dollars went to the wrong department because of that errant information, then you could work with the budget office on a budget transfer to get the dollars moved into the right department. Do you agree with that, Henry?
Yeah, that'd be fine. But we will need to know what department that goes to coordinate that.
Definitely have to be some documentation, but I would start by entering a help ticket with OSR.
Okay, we have a question from LJ. Do you know if CAS distributes perm budget to their departments?
So CAS being the College of Arts and Sciences, I don't know that. Do you know, Henry?
Well, I mean, if there is permanent budget at the department level, when we did the copies at year end, 6/30/2016, that budget would have been copied over to the exact departments. Now, if there's a recoup process that College of Arts and Science Dean's office goes through, you would have to follow up with them.
Okay, we have a question from Casbo2. Are there any plans to make this report available for future years as estimates, projections?
That has been requested. There are several reports in the queue that are kind of higher priority, or I guess more urgent. And so I don't know where that stands in the list, but I know that that is a current request.
Okay, I have a question from Greg. Why is my data from this new report different than my GL formula allocation? Only 1222, but he's curious.
Greg, I don't know what the GL formula allocation is.
Looks like Greg's typing a response.
Okay.
The formula allocation given this fiscal year.
Oh, you said G. Okay. Well, most likely it's due to rounding. So there's logic that has to be, when they develop the report, they have all sorts of logic on how they pull these numbers in. And what we don't see on the screen in Connect Carolina, so for example, in Connect Carolina you can look at an amount and it says $12.36. And then when you go and look at the table, so Susan was explaining earlier what the tables are. It's like the place where all this information is stored behind the scenes in Connect Carolina. When you look at that table, it actually says $12.36. It says 0.361289. Like in some cases, it goes out more than 2 decimal points. Now, I honestly don't know why that is. I've asked several people, consultants and otherwise, and nobody quite knows why PeopleSoft does that. But what the report has to do is it rounds an amount up. So that's completely based on rounding. And I mean, you know, you said nitpicky, and yeah, I mean, it might be, but it's a fair question, but it is a rounding issue. So that's when you see where things are off a penny here, or like you said, overall, $12.22, it's based on rounding. Not a bad question at all.
We have another question here from Amy. She's trying to export this data into a spreadsheet, and it downloads to a zip file that can't be opened. She wants to know, is she missing something with downloading this into a spreadsheet?
Yes, you're probably choosing the wrong filter, but if you go to CC Info, Susan has a good deal of documentation about how to use the features in this report, and it talks specifically about how to download. So I'd recommend you go and take a look at that documentation.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in at the moment. I guess we can give it another minute here.
So I'll just say, since it's 11:03, we'll hang out for a few minutes to see if you have any more questions. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we are at time. So if anybody needs to drop off, that's fine. But we'll hang out a few minutes for more questions. All right, maybe one more minute, last chance. Any more questions, anybody? Okay, well, I'll fill in that minute just by reminding everybody that we're posting all these documents on CC Info. Actually, the procedure for running the report, and the one explaining all about the formula allocation formula is already posted there. We'll post this recording and then the accompanying PowerPoint up hopefully by the end of the day. It just depends on if we have any technical issues downloading anything from Blackboard. But if everything goes smoothly, then that'll get posted by the end of the day as well. And you can find all those on CC Info, and you can do a keyword search either at the top search field, or you can go to the training tab and search there. But just search by the title of the document, and you will see it there. Okay. Did we get any more questions in?
I did not get any more questions, and it doesn't look like anyone is currently typing any in.
Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and officially conclude this webinar. Thank you all very much for your participation, and thank you to Nicole and Hendry and Rebecca, and we will sign off. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.